Alright, so I know that this is the internet, but you'll just have to trust me on this having actually happened to me. And please, bear with this slightly lengthy recollection. So, my extremely Catholic grandmother owned a house in rural New York. We'd often go there when we went to camp or have family holidays. The place always just had this weird vibe to it too, as it was over 150 years old. I had several paranormal experiences, like seeing what I believed to be a spirit man in a brown coat and top hat in the kitchen, or hearing children's voices in the bunk bedroom when nobody was home, as well as light fixtures acting strangely, like bulbs going out on holiday lights one by one in sequence instead of all at once, and lots of weird stuff. But these experiences were never emotion-inducing or threatening, just weird things that I was convinced I saw, until one day when I was about 10. So, I was there alone while my grandmother went shopping and was watching Avatar: The Last Airbender and playing with Legos and pretty standard stuff. I went to the bathroom at one point and noticed the door to the basement. I never thought anything of the basement because it was always closed and off limits anyway, but being unsupervised and the bold kid that I was, I opened the door to get a peek. It was absolutely pitch black down those stairs, but within about 3 seconds I felt an intense chill and an absolutely terrifying feeling of just pure evil wash over me, like a primal fear. Every instinct in my being and soul went into full panic mode as I felt the presence rapidly approaching up the stairs. I shut the door and locked it as fast as I could, and I ran to the common room and grabbed a cross, convinced that it was some sort of demon. And upon telling my grandmother this, her face went completely white, as if she wasn't as shocked as afraid, and as if she knew something about it that she wasn't telling me. She called a priest into the house and had him bless the place. When he opened the door to the basement, he actually stopped abruptly and slowly descended. He performed his blessing down there and confided in us that he had felt the same feeling of dread, but that the house was protected by the Lord now and we had nothing to fear. I was always wary after that though, but never experienced it again, and certainly never went near the basement again. As I grew up, it weighed less on me, and I thought that maybe I was just a kid who spooked himself. And maybe I had a grandmother who was just so religious that she thought a non-existent demon was present, and maybe the priest felt what we were telling him that we had felt, and maybe the whole thing just wasn't real. Unfortunately for that theory, and the reason I share this is because I learned a few years ago that the family that had moved into the house after my grandparents moved to Florida had abruptly moved out. They had actually forfeited their down payment and left immediately because, and I quote from the realtor's report, the demons in the basement were terrorizing their children to an unbearable degree. So, I don't know what was down there, but it definitely wasn't human, it wasn't benevolent, and it definitely wasn't make-believe. I lived in a small town in PA, and it was a snow day, so school was closed. I'm a female and was about 11 years old at the time. My 2 cousins, both male, lived about 15 minutes walking down the road. One of my cousins was my age, the other was about 6. The area that we lived in was typically quiet and very safe. Not a lot happened, and when something did, everyone knew about it immediately. It was the type of town that everyone's parents and even most of their grandparents grew up in, so everyone basically knew each other. So we decided we wanted to go sledding, so I walked to their house one day. My aunt was actually a stay-at-home mum, so she was there. She greeted me at the door when I arrived, and I waited on my cousins to put their snowsuits on. After they got around, we all 3 went back out to the sleds from the shed. My aunt decided that while we were getting everything we needed, she would shovel the sidewalks out front and make a path for us to get to the car. They had a long sidewalk from the back door leading to the shed, and right beside the shed was an alley that was rarely used, at the end of the backyard. The 3 of us had just approached the shed, and we noticed the door was either locked or stuck. As we were standing there messing with the door, an old pickup truck with 2 older men inside creeps up the alley and stops right next to or behind us. The driver then got out and quickly walked around to the passenger side toward the 3 of us. He was about 2 feet away from us, and we didn't think anything of it because we were all focused on the door, when all of a sudden I heard my aunt yell, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" And as soon as she questioned him, the man ran back, got in his truck, and just sped off down the alley. After calling the police and giving them a description of the men and what happened, my aunt lectured us about being more aware of our surroundings, and she wondered why we didn't pick up my younger cousin and run to the house. But in all honesty, we were two 11-year-olds and we were a bit naive, I must admit. But we had no clue anything was wrong, and we didn't really notice someone was attempting to even kidnap us. Our backs were turned to the man and we were focused on the shed door. I only really saw him in my peripheral vision. From what I recall too, the men were never caught either. To this day, I still have no idea how she even knew anything was going on. The snow muffled most of the sounds that you would normally hear outside, and the truck was rather quiet. She told us too that she just had a gut feeling that something was off, and she came back to check on us to be sure everything was okay, and to her surprise, we were just about to be snatched up. I think about it from time to time as well, and it still gives me chills. I always wonder what would have happened if she hadn't have checked on us. I am forever thankful for her mother's intuition though, because it literally saved all of our lives. I finally had a place all to myself. I lived in Austin, and I always had roommates or lived with a roommate. I broke up with my boyfriend and got a place to myself. I went to my parents for Christmas and had a major surgery when I came back. Went back to partying on downtown every night after work too. I had a usual routine of coming home at 2 a.m, hopping into the shower, putting on my pajamas, a face mask, hair still in a towel, wrap up in a blanket and watch murder mysteries, alien conspiracies on TV for a couple of hours because I was usually still pretty high off the night. One night though, I just felt something was off and looked up from my TV. My apartment had huge windows in the front living room area and in the back bedroom area that slid like sliding doors, for context. I looked up and there was a man with his shirt over his head and pants at his ankle, just jerking off to me, watching TV with a towel turban and green face mask. I stood up and told him to get lost, and he ran away and tripped over his pants. I didn't think too much of it because, well, Austin is weird. But a few nights later, he was back again. So this time I opened the door and yelled at him. 3 nights after that, he came back again, and this time I called the police, and they came out and he obviously wasn't there but took my description of the naked man. A few nights later, he's back again. I call the police and my friend or co-worker, who obviously doesn't believe me. And this pattern continues for 2 months. Every few days, this guy would show up. The police were annoyed with me, and they actually put a cop car outside my apartment for 2 weeks. This guy clearly was not going to come with the cops right outside, so the cops eventually were like, "Sucks for you." It happens again, and they bring out the helicopters over my neighborhood looking for a naked dude. But none of my friends believe me, and I don't think the cops do either. The only person who believes me is my neighbor in the army, who takes me to buy a security camera that we have nowhere to put because the window is a little too reflective on the camera. So now I have this pattern of calling cops, neighbors, friends, co-workers, all who think I'm making this up every 3 nights or so. My apartment complex said that I could leave if I feel I'm in danger, and genuinely I didn't think that I was in danger. I was just super annoyed at the time that this guy was tugging his balls to me in green face masks during my downtime at 2 a.m. Well, I eventually gave up on everyone believing me, besides my neighbor. He had a sister who had a stalker, so yeah, kinda makes sense that he would believe me. And that night, I'm back from partying and I do my usual routine and I turn on Ancient Aliens. I'm half asleep on my couch when I hear a noise from the bedroom. So I slowly sit up and listen. There's a sliding noise, and then the noise of the blinds being opened. I stand up, and thankfully the kitchen drawer with knives was literally a part of the hallway, so I just start tossing knives down the hallway towards the window, yelling, "What the hell? Why me?" I finally look at the guy in the window, my naked dude, and he's just staring at me in shock as if I'm the crazy one, and as if I shouldn't be throwing knives at him. And then we had a short staring contest before my neighbor came running downstairs, busting through the door like an Avenger or something, and the guy ran off. 911, and we're on the phone again, and my neighbors are on the phone with my family telling them to send me back to Dallas in any place that isn't on the first floor ever again. I did have to do a lineup at the police station eventually, picked the guy out but no proof it was him, and I was back in Dallas in no time. I eventually went on with my life, and then one day I was watching the news with my brother, and the Austin bomber was on TV. And there he was, my naked dude. So I've told this story just to a few friends, but I either get laughs because they don't believe me, or they're just creeped out as I was when the incident actually happened. So one night on Thanksgiving, when I was about 10 years old, 23 now, my cousin Chris and my bro Arf and our old friend David decided to play a game of hide and seek in the neighborhood. We were all the same age, and we would often play outside because we just wanted to get away from the adult stuff. We also got a few kicks out of hiding in the neighborhood after dark and whatnot. So we set boundaries, and we had one main rule: you cannot hide in the house. Mind you, it was often broken though, but we would always set it anyways. Arf and David were the hiders, and Chris and I were the seekers this day. We counted to 100, and then we were off to find them. About 15 minutes passed by, and we couldn't find them anywhere. Then 30 minutes, 45 minutes, not a sign of them anywhere. But me and Chris were a bit concerned at this point, considering that it had been too long since we'd seen them. We started to yell, "Arf, David, come out, we're not playing anymore." But there was no answer. We then went into the house to check all the rooms, but nothing. Only the adults eating and laughing and having a normal Thanksgiving. Chris and I went out to the front and started to say that we should probably get adult help here and let them know what's going on. We didn't want to alert the whole party by telling them that we couldn't find Arf and David, so we somehow got David's dad to come outside to the front lawn and see if he could help spot them in the distance or something. So we went out to the edge of the driveway with David's dad, and he suddenly yells, "Hey, I think that's your brother." My cousin and I look, and we see my brother running down the sidewalk away from us. While David's dad stays on the edge of the driveway, Chris and I start running after him, yelling that he give up and that we're not playing anymore. We weren't catching up to him, but we weren't far off now. We were about 10 feet away from him. We see him run and hide behind a pair of palm trees that was in the corner of one of the houses down the block. We finally felt that we had him cornered. Chris goes to the right side and I take the left. We knew at that second that we had him. That was until we checked behind the tree, and there was no one there. Chris and I just kind of looked at each other dumbfounded, because the only way that he would have been able to escape was either through us or over a 6-foot fence that was on a hill, and we knew that that was impossible because we would have seen or heard him. My cousin and I started to walk back immediately and met David's dad at the edge of the driveway. David's dad automatically says, "You guys saw that, right?" And we said, "Of course, we were chasing after him." He says, "Okay, because Arf and David are actually inside the house." We went back inside the house, and nobody believed a word that we said though, even with David's dad saying that he saw this kid as well. My brother swears that it was not him and that he and David were inside the house spying on us the whole time. Something that always runs through my mind when I think of this story, besides the fact that it wasn't my brother or our friend David, is that when Chris and I were chasing after him or whoever that was, I remember feeling like I just wasn't running as fast as I could. And what would have happened if I had actually caught up to this guy or kid or whatever it was? What would have happened then? I can't help but think that this was some kind of paranormal event, but whenever my cousin and I talk about this story, we call that person the Red Man because of the red shirt that he was wearing, just like my brother was, that Thanksgiving night. This happened 14 years ago when I was 17 years old. It happened in my childhood home, which in a previous post I explained a lot of strange things happened there. And this is the most terrifying experience that I've ever had with the paranormal to date. I always knew that my house was haunted. I would see things out of the corner of my eye, hear weird noises, and just have strange things happen. I really tried to convince myself part of it was just my imagination and my own interest in the paranormal. But one February night, I would experience something that, to this day, makes the hair stand on my neck. So when I was 17, my parents separated. I opted to stay in my family home with my dad. My father relapsed during this time and was actually a heavy alcoholic, so I was left alone quite a bit, especially when he was drinking. To get a better picture of this story, I kind of need to explain how the house was laid out too. So the first thing is that the living room was huge. The couch was placed on one wall that had a window in the kitchen, and no glass, just a cut-out rectangle that let us see each other from the kitchen to the living room. To get to the kitchen, you would have to go through the office and hallway all around the house. In the back of the kitchen is the stairs to the basement and our back door that leads to our backyard, which has its own road access as we parked in the back of our house. Now, one night, I was alone. I have always been a bit of a night owl too, and it was about 2 a.m. when this event happened. I was sitting on my couch watching CSI, and I heard my back door open and close. This was not totally unusual, as my uncle lived close by and the closest access was through the back lane from our backyard. So, my first thoughts were annoyed. If my dad was coming through the back door, he was coming from my uncle's, and he would definitely be extremely drunk. So, I called out Dad, but there was no answer. Annoyed that he wasn't responding, I yelled out Dad, but again, no answer. At this point, I'm pretty ticked off, because if he isn't responding to me, then he's really, really drunk, and I hated dealing with him like that. So I got up from the couch and turned around to look through the window to the kitchen that showed the kitchen and the back door and said, Dad, and I stopped as soon as I saw it. At first, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. Standing in the middle of my kitchen was a 7 to 8 foot tall black silhouette. I could see this thing's head, shoulders, arms, and legs, but no facial features. It was completely black, like the blackest of black that I've ever seen. I was terrified, and I whispered Dad one last time, just to make sure that I wasn't dreaming or hoping it was just a practical joke or something. But there was no answer, and no movement. Just this tall dark shadow peering at me. I quickly ran towards the desk across the living room, grabbed an envelope knife. It was the only weapon available. Walked around the corner to the porch, grabbed my boots, and this is February in northern Canada, and just silently stood there, waiting to see what would happen if I stayed. I must admit that at this point, I was a little bit curious, and that trumped my fear at the time. After standing there for a few minutes, I could hear creaking coming from the kitchen. My cat walked past me from the living room and towards the kitchen. She looked into the kitchen and all of a sudden started acting really strange. She moved one leg at a time in a sort of stiff motion. All her hair was raised, and once she was out of whatever trance that she was in, she just bolted upstairs. And at this point, I was done. I ran out the door and ran barefoot in the snow until I felt safe. I put my boots on and continued to walk to our local convenience store to call my dad. My dad was actually sober at his girlfriend's and agreed to come and get me and bring me home and investigate. He went into the house first, inspecting everything, and he couldn't find anything. I then hesitantly went inside myself and told him that it came through the back door. He walked to the back door and he said, "How? It's locked." And the color drained from my face as I myself had to turn the handle and try to open the door again, and it would not open. I still really don't know what happened that night and why this thing manifested itself to me or what it even wanted. I do know that it terrified me though, and I refused to sleep in the house for weeks after that, and to this day, discussing it makes my eyes water and my hair stand on end. Something definitely came into my house that night, something completely uninvited. So this happened in my senior year in high school, 2015. I was driving home alone from a movie with my friends on a Saturday night. After about the first 5 minutes, it becomes the same route that I drive to school every day, so I kind of went on to autopilot. I never text and drive, and I rarely speed, and definitely was not speeding then because I still had my junior license. I was pulling up to a light that had just turned green in enough time that I didn't have to slow down. Now I always do a little, but I went through the light and then I just remember the most force that I've ever felt in my life. I opened my eyes when I heard a man banging on the window, yelling in, asking if I could get out or if I needed to break the window. I was able to get my seatbelt off and the door was able to open once I unlocked it. I went to look for my phone, and the man said, "Forget your phone. I already called the cops and they're on their way. Please go sit on that hill far away. It's smoking and I want to make sure it doesn't start a fire." So, dazed and confused, I went to sit where he told me to after he asked if I was okay. My hand had glass in it as well as my face, but not life-threatening, so I just had to wait till the ambulance got there. Right as I sat on the hill, I heard the man who was helping me yell, "Hey, where the hell do you think you're going?" and just took off full sprint down the road. I was so confused. I mean, why the hell was this man who just helped me chasing this poor 50-ish woman down the road? I realized soon that it was the woman who hit me because she was nowhere to be seen after initially seeing her get out of the car. She was trying to run away from the scene. The man successfully got her though and brought her back to the scene. The cops were there when he got back with her, and he immediately said, "Breathalyze her," to the cops about the other woman. He gave his statement. All while this is happening, this cute little boy whose house it was just outside of brought me over a bag of M&Ms and water and said, "How you spun so much, does it hurt?" And to be honest, I had no idea my car had spun out at all because it all just happened too fast. I all of a sudden hear, "Yeah, screw you, you little whore. You think this is on me? No, you hit me." I told the boy with me to go back to his mum at this point and thank you so much. It was definitely not the scene for an 8-year-old boy. She then says, "I know you can hear me. Don't ignore me. You can't because you're going to see me in court when I sue your ass." She then tried to come towards me and one of the officers held her back. And at that point, they said that she blew a .23 and they put her in cuffs. I had yet to give my statement to the cops and I thought, what am I supposed to say? And then I realized in the midst of all of this, I forgot to even call my parents. My mum was across the country for work, so I called my dad. My dad was at a concert about 3 hours away, so he called my neighbor. My neighbor, our best family friend since before I was born, calls me and says, "I'll be there in 10. Don't say anything to the cops until you tell me the story first." I told him that I was nervous because I was the one to T-bone her. He said, "Just tell me what happened," and I said that I went through a 100% green light and the lady went through the red hitting me and she blew a .23. And he lost it. He went over and said, "You almost just killed an 18-year-old because you got behind a wheel after drinking. How stupid do you have to be in this day and age to do that?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I wish I had. That girl should have been thinking. They can take me and not her when she's the one who hit me." She went on to scream like this the entire time that we were there too. Just, saying that I was terrible and that she wished she had killed me. And finally the cops took her away and my cuts were all fixed up. They had been doing it throughout all of this, by the way. My car was completely written off. It was a Volvo, and the cops said that, from what they've seen from other accidents, if it was any other kind of car, I would have definitely been seriously injured. I honestly thought that I was going to have to see her in court, but she just didn't even show up. I hope I never have to see her again, though, and I wish so much that I got the name or the number of the man that helped me. He just kind of disappeared after he gave his statement. But he was the real hero in all of this. I really don't know what I would have done if he hadn't have been there. Oh, and thank you to the poor little kid who had to see the raging alcoholic getting arrested. This happened a while ago when I was about 16 or 17. I'd been living with my oldest sister as a sort of a live-in babysitter for my 3 nephews at the time, and my room was in the unfinished basement. Sort of just a big area with a rug on the floor, a dresser, a bed, TV, the usual. So I was down there reading or something one day when I heard my sister's voice, clear as day, call down to me, "Hey, come upstairs." Having no reason to think anything of it, I rolled off my bed and make my way towards the stairs. I get about halfway up when a feeling of just absolute terror hit me. My hair stand on end and my skin crawls. It's the middle of the day though, sun shining brightly through the many windows of the entryway that sits atop the open stairs, and I just try to shake it off, wondering what the heck. I get to the top and the feeling only gets worse. I call out my sister's name and then realize something quickly. It's silent in the house, and anybody with any number of young kids, especially 3 boys all under 10, know that never happens. There is a little carpeted set of steps that leads to the always open French doors of the main house. I don't see anyone inside, and as soon as I take a step toward them, my heart leaps into my throat. I've never been afraid of anything like I was in that moment. On a whim, I walked away to check the attached garage for a car. I had just opened the door when I heard her voice say again, "Come in here." I glanced into the garage, saw that a car wasn't in there, and at this point, I didn't waste any time. I raced down the basement steps, grabbed my car keys, and I just noped out of there. It's been 10 years, and I still have no idea what happened that day. I told my friends and family and got a few "you just scared yourself, silly girl, and you must have imagined it" kind of things, but I don't think so. I'd been living out there for months by that time, been alone dozens of times, and nothing like that had ever happened before. So, if anyone has any ideas, I'm all ears.